Hello, and thank you for joining today. This session is being recorded, just to let everyone know there. My name is Michael Gummel, and I'm the product engineer at Paradigm Technology Consulting. Today, we'll be walking through the year-end closing process within Dynamics GP. First, a few housekeeping bits. Everyone has been muted. I'm expecting there to be questions as we go through today's session. So if you do have a question, please raise your hand using the hand icon in Teams. And after each section, I will pause. At that point, I will review any questions posted in the chat or can unmute the individual so they can ask their question specifically. I will be following along the document that Jason sent out to all, so please follow along and take notes where applicable. So let's get started. Hopefully everyone is doing well. All right, if someone could raise their hand and let me know that they can hear me and that they can see my screen, I would appreciate that. Great, thank you very much. Okay, so to get started, the actual year-end closing process for GP has not changed in a number of years. So any of you who have been doing this for the last couple of years, it'll be very, very similar for you. There is one change with the year-end update, and we'll hit that first. So just kind of as an agenda today, we're going to go through some of that 2020 year-end information. We'll talk about when to close and the order for closing modules. Then we'll go through the inventory, receivables, payables, the payroll processing, fixed assets, and general ledger. And in fact, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to change up that sequence a little bit, and we'll leave payroll for the very end, so that if any of you who are do not have payroll, you can feel free to jump off at that point. So let's first talk about some of the changes or some of the important information that we have shared with all of our customers, but just to make sure that everybody's aware of it. Microsoft has released the 2020 year-end updates for Dynamics GP, and there's a couple of important notes for that release. Ordinarily, the year-end updates are most important for those companies running payroll through GP, but there were a few changes made by the government to the forms 1099 NEC and 1096. So if you're currently on version 2018 or above, the year-end updates will automatically take you to 2018.3, which was the October 2020 release. With that being said, it's imperative that you confirm all of your ISV products that you may be utilizing, or any customizations or anything along those lines are compatible with that release prior to running that update. If you're currently on one of the 2016 versions, the year-end update will not update you all the way to 2018.3, but will rather patch that version of 2016 that you're on, and therefore you shouldn't need any additional testing or ISV upgrading. But please contact us if you have any questions or concerns. If you're currently on a version released prior to 2016, you're on a version no longer supported by Microsoft and therefore would not be receiving any of the year-end updates. Okay. So with that, let me just pause right there and see if there are any questions. Okay. Not seeing any questions, I will continue to move on then. As I said, I'll stop after each kind of grouping here and just kind of see if there's any questions that are out there. All right. So let's talk about when to close and the order of closing for the modules within GP. So there are a couple of modules such as inventory and fixed assets closed at the end of the fiscal year before posting transactions in the next fiscal year. Because when those modules are closed, the dates the transactions were completed are not used in determining if they are part of the close. Rather, the closing process will include anything that is posted since the last close was completed. With regards to the receivables and payables modules, you may see an inaccuracy in some certain fields and summary reports, smart lists, and information in summary windows if these modules are not closed prior to posting transactions in the next year. Therefore, it's recommended to process the fiscal year end or calendar year end close prior to posting transactions for the next year. Now, there are some scripts that can be run if you don't do that and you really feel the need to have those amounts fall within the proper years. Now, it's important to note that the grand majority of the reports are going to be okay. So within receivables and payables and things like that, your year to date, your life to date, all those types of reports are going to be fine because they run off of the transaction date that the system was posted on. The reports that you may see some inaccuracies are the ones that do the since last closed. So there's a few of those that are that way, but the grand majority of all the reports within the system are date sensitive. So just keep that in mind. Also, keep in mind that there's no year-end close for sales order or purchase order processing. Those closes for those modules happen in conjunction with receivables and purchasing module. All right. For payroll, the calendar year end is independent and should always be done at the end of a calendar year. Okay, so it's important that payroll is done at the end of the calendar year as well as your fiscal year. We will go through some of the steps and things that get affected within the payroll system later on. In terms of the process of the modules or the order that they should be done in, it's not a hard and fast rule by any means, but it's suggested that this is the kind of order that they're done in. The one that really matters is the general ledger. That should always be done last. So, we're recommending that inventory be done, then receivables, payables, fixed assets, and then the general ledger. All right, so the first module we're going to jump into is the inventory. Now, the way that our the manual that you were provided with is set up is we kind of go through what the summary steps are, and then we go through and talk about those steps in detail. So before I jump into the inventory, let me just come back over and see if there are any questions out there yet. Again, if you do have questions, please feel free to put those into the chat area, or if you don't feel comfortable, if you're not don't think you can get the question across properly in a chat, please feel free to raise your hand and I will go ahead and unmute you. All right, again, not seeing any questions out there. We will go ahead and continue along here. All right, so inventory. So kind of going through the steps of the process. Again, the inventory should be closed out as close to the end of the year as possible, and prior to doing any transactions, prior to posting any transactions for the new year. The closing will transfer all summarized current year quantity, cost, and sales amounts to transaction history for the items. And it also updates each item's beginning quantity to the quantity on hand at each site. So the steps that we're going to go through for this process are: we're going to post all transactions for the year. We're going to do a reconcile on the inventory quantities. We're going to complete our physical inventory count and post any adjustments. Then we'll go ahead and print any additional reports that we may want to run. We're going to make a backup, and you're going to see, we're recommending making backups quite often during this process, just to make sure that if anything goes wrong, that we can get back to a good point of time. Then we're going to go ahead and set that system date to 12/31/2020, run the year-end closing process. And then if you want, you can go through and close out the fiscal periods for the inventory series, and then again, make that final backup. So in terms of walking through some of these steps, so we're going to want to make sure that we post. The first step here is, again, post all transactions for the year. We're going to want to make sure that all invoicing, sales order processing, and inventory transactions, including PO receipts and transactions for the current year, have been entered and posted. Again, that's important to ensure that the historical information is accurate for the year which we're closing, and that the year-to-date amounts are accurately stated for the new year. If you do wish to enter future period transactions before closing the year, create a new batch with those new transactions, but do not post it until after the year has been closed. Okay. Step 2 is going to be reconciling the inventory quantities. So to reconcile the inventory quantities, we're going to come over to our Dynamics GP. We're going to go under Tools, Utilities, Inventory, and Reconcile. Okay, and then we're going to want to go ahead and say to reconcile all of our item numbers. And what that will do is that will that'll match up the information behind the scenes. And at the end, you would be presented with a report if there have been any discrepancies found. If adjustments have been made by the system, they'll be reflected on the reconcile report, along with any serial or lot numbers that were added for the adjusted items. If any serial or lot numbers have been added, you can then use the item transaction entry windows to make adjustments for those serial and lot numbers. Okay. So once we've completed the reconcile, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and complete a physical inventory count and post any adjustments. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to print out a physical inventory checklist using the inventory activity reports. So again, under reports, inventory activity. Okay, and we'll get our stock status report there. And we'll go ahead and run that report. You can also run the stock count list here as well if you would rather use that report to do that the stock count for you. Once we have completed our physical count, we're going to want to go back and make any necessary adjustments. Okay, and depending on how you do your physical count, whether you do the stock count through the system, or whether you do your stock count outside of the system, and then just go in and make adjustments to the system. So if you do it outside, then we would go in and we would do our inventory transactions to go through and make those adjustments. If we're doing the stock count through the system, then we're going to go ahead and use that stock count entry window and post those transactions. All right. So then once we have completed the physical inventory and made any adjustments to that, we'll want to go ahead and print out any additional reports that we're going to want to have on hand at the end of the year, including the stock status report, maybe purchase receipts, serial number, listing report, lot number, lot number list report, those types of things. So you want to go ahead and run those reports, and it's not a bad idea to go ahead and save those reports off to the system, to your system as well. Not only just print them out, but save those off as files as well. Let's see, I got somebody else here. Okay, so once we have the additional reports run, we're going to go ahead and make a backup of our system. And again, the reason we want to do that is just in case there's anything that goes funky with the power or anything like that while we're doing the year-end close, we can go ahead and get right back to a good copy of that data. All right, once we have that backup, then we're going to want to go ahead and set our system date. Again, you can set the system date by clicking the date field down in the bottom of your window. We'll go ahead and we'll want to set that to 12/31/2020. And then once we have that date there, and I'm not going to make that change, once we'll do that, then we're ready to actually go ahead and run that year-end close process. So there's a few things that happen when we go ahead and run that close process within inventory. The first is it transfers all of our summarized current year quantity, costs, and sales amounts to the transaction history records. Again, only for those records where we're actually keeping history. So again, I know our consultants always make sure that they recommend that you always mark those boxes to keep the transaction history. If those boxes are not marked and you're doing the year-end close, then you're going to lose that history because you're not going to be tracking that. So again, it's always important to make sure that you have all those boxes marked to track the history on all of your items. The next thing it does is it updates the item's beginning quantity to the quantity on hand at each site. There are certain reports, such as the turnover report, that use that beginning quantity field for calculations. It will also zero the quantity sold field in the item's quantity maintenance for each site. You can remove purchase receipts for items that have been completely sold and removes cost change history prior to the date you specify. You have the option of removing any discontinued items from the item records that have been completely sold, as well as removing any lot attributes for the records of lot numbered items if they've been completely sold. And the final thing it will do is it will update the standard cost of each item to the current cost if you're using either the FIFO periodic or LIFO periodic valuation methods. All right, so let's take a look at what that year-end closing window looks like. So to get to that year-end closing, again, we're going to go under our tools, routines, inventory. All right. And within here, it works better if you choose the routines versus the utilities, because then you can't find what you're looking for. So again, tools, routines, inventory, year-end close. That will then bring up that year-end inventory closing window. Now you have a couple of different options on here. One is you can remove discontinued items, you can remove sold lot attributes, and you can remove sold receipts and change cost change history prior to the date that you enter in right here into this field. In addition, you can also update the item's standard cost. So what do each of those things mean there? So removing the discontinued items, if we mark that button, all discontinued items that have a zero balance will be removed during the year-end closing process. Discontinued items that have a quantity on hand of 0 and do not have any unposted transactions will be completely removed from the inventory module. Note, if any of you are using the service module, verify whether any discontinued items exist on any unposted service documents. If so, the documents must be posted prior to proceeding. Right. The reports and inquiries will still be able to pull that information regarding those discontinued items. However, they will not show up in any lookups that you do on the item number since it's been removed from the item master. Right. If you would like to print a report or inquire on the discontinued items, you will need to include that item from within the item number range. Okay, so again, if you want to remove any items that you've marked as discontinued, as long as they have a 0 balance, we can remove that, remove those items. If any of those have a balance in there, or if they have any transactions still sitting out there anywhere within the system, they will not be deleted. Sold lot attributes. If we mark that box, values for completely sold lot numbers will be removed. For example, you can remove the value red for the lot attribute color if you sold all lot number items that have been assigned the value red. Okay, again, so this is lot attributes, not lot numbers. And then the next option there, the sold receipts and cost change history. If we mark that, then all sold receipts whose quantity received and quantity sold are equal will be removed. We'll also remove cost change history prior to the date that you specify. And just a note on that, cost change information is saved to history when the standard cost is changed for a LIFO periodic or a FIFO periodic item, or when the current cost is changed for an average perpetual item. It should be noted there that it's an optional step and may not be done every year. Those values may be helpful when items are returned through invoicing, so you may decide you don't want to remove the receipts from the file. The cost change history is only deleted prior to the date you specify. Therefore, you can keep 1 or more years of this if you prefer. So basically, what you might want to do is if you do want to go ahead and remove that history, again, you do not have to. It's an optional step. In fact, all of these items here are all optional. You don't have to do any of them. But if you do want to go ahead and remove that the history, you might want to do it for a year back. So in this case here, you might want to set it to 12/31/2018 or 2019 so that you have that full year's worth of information still in the system, just in case you do need to go ahead and do any returns on any of those items. You'll have that cost information in the system there. And then finally, updates item standard cost. If we mark that button, any items that have been signed FIFO periodic or LIFO periodic valuation methods will be adjusted automatically to reflect each item's current cost or the amount you most recently paid for that item. Okay. So once you go ahead and mark any of your buttons that you want there or fill in that date, we go ahead and hit process, and that will go ahead and then process that year-end close. The final step, and this is again an optional one, it can be done after each individual module or possibly after all of the modules have been done. What you can do is you can go in and close the fiscal periods for the inventory series. So again, to do that, we're going to go under GP, Tools, Setup, Company, Fiscal Periods. We'll have all of our fiscal periods here, and then we can just go ahead and mark the series closed for inventory. That way we make sure that nothing else can be posted to any of those periods while we're going through and doing the rest of our module or closing out the rest of our modules. So again, after we're done that, we're going to want to go ahead and again make a backup. And then that has now finished off the close of the inventory module. So a couple tips there for inventory. Again, we want to make sure that we're doing that year-end close before any transactions for the new year have been posted. And another note there is, and I should have mentioned this when I talked about hitting that process button on the year-end close. There is no year-end closing report for inventory. So, don't look to see that there's a report that prints out after you've gone ahead and done that close. All right. Takes us through the inventory. So again, I will pause here for a moment and see if there are any questions on the inventory area. Not seeing any questions. I hope that means that, or doesn't mean that people are not out there still. Hopefully you all can still hear me and are following along. But we'll go ahead and move into the receivables management area then, if there are no questions. All right, receivables. So in receivables, there's actually two year-end close processes that can be done. If you are on a calendar year-end basis, then both of those processes can be done at the same time and should be done at the same time. If you are on a fiscal year-end close, then you can do your fiscal year-end close at the end of your fiscal year and go ahead and do the calendar year-end close at the end of the calendar year. And again, the reason that there are two different ones there, the calendar year-end close will clear out the calendar year-to-date finance charges and move them to the last calendar year field on the customer records. Whereas the closing of the fiscal year will transfer all amounts other than the calendar year-to-date finance charges to the last year. All right. Again, it's recommended that you close the calendar year and fiscal years as close to the last date of the year as you can. This will enable the since last close view to have the correct totals and ensures that all receivables all receivables reports with the year-to-date totals will be correct. And there is a little note there, the calendar year view and the fiscal year view on the customer summary window will not change since they are date sensitive. Right, so again, that's where I kind of talked about the the majority of the reports and things like that within GP are date sensitive, so they won't so they will show the proper amounts there. On the customer yearly summary inquiry window, there is an option to view the amounts since last close. Those are the amounts that would not show up correctly if you had or they would not match like your year-to-date totals or last year totals and things like that if you had not closed the year as if you had posted any transactions for the next year prior to running the year-end close. All right, so let's talk about the steps to go ahead and do the year-end close. Again, step one is going to be the same in all the different modules. Make sure that all of our transactions are posted for the calendar year and that we've completed any of the month-end procedures for December, such as your aging, running your the finance charges, things like that. Then we're going to want to make a backup. We'll go ahead and set the GP system date again to 12/31/2020. And then we're going to close the calendar year or the fiscal year or both years at the same time. On the receivables year-end close window, there is the option to print a report once the year has been closed. Again, that is a good idea to run that report. It's not a mandatory thing, but it is a good idea to run that. Step 5 is going to be close the fiscal periods using the fiscal period setup window. And then step 6, which we're going to talk about a little bit more under the payables area, is closing the sales tax periods for the year using the tax year-end closing window. Now, the reason I mentioned that we're going to talk about a little more in payables is you want to wait to do that piece, which is the tax year-end close. You want to wait until you've closed out both payables and receivables, as your sales tax files are used by both modules or both series. So you're going to want to make sure until you close out both of those series prior to running that tax year-end closing. And then again, making a final backup. So let's go through some of these steps in a little bit more detail here. So again, posting all of our transactions, making sure that everything is posted from sales order processing or invoicing, as well as in our receivables, any cash receipts batches or anything like that. We want to then go ahead and make a backup. We're going to set our date again down here in the bottom corner, set our date to be 12/31. And then we can go ahead and do our year-end close. So again, under GP, tools, routines, sales this time. Down at the bottom, there's a year-end close. So we'll go ahead and click on that. Again, we have the option here to close either the fiscal or the calendar or both. Again, if you are on a calendar year end, you can just mark all and it will do both at the same time. And then here is our option here for printing that report. So again, recommendation is to leave that button marked there to get that report. So I would go ahead and hit process. It would then process the year end and go ahead and run that report for me. Once I have that report run, again, that report can be saved off as one of your year-end closing reports, and should be saved off as part of your company's permanent record. So once we've gone ahead and run that close process there, again, the next step here would be our optional bit to go ahead and close off the fiscal periods. Again, marking the sales modules closed or the sales series closed there. All right. Again, if you have not closed the purchasing module yet, then you're not going to want to do the closing of the sales tax periods yet. If then you could go ahead and do the tools, routines, company tax year-end close and close off that sales taxes there. Again, that'll just move it from one year to the next. After we've done all of our steps, we're going to make that final backup. Okay. So a couple tips here for the receivables. Again, you do not have to run the year-end close prior to doing any transactions for the new year. It's strongly suggested that you do. But again, the majority of the reports within GP, within the receivables module there, are all date sensitive. So even if you do post things for the next year, the majority of the reports are going to come out fine. It's really those couple of inquiries and reports where we say, give me the information since the last close. All right, and that pretty much takes us through our receivables. So let me see again if there are any questions on the receivable side. Again, when we talk about receivables, it's the sales module as well. There is no specific close, year-end close for sales order processing. So again, any questions on receivables? Okay, not seeing any there. All right, we'll go ahead and continue on. Oh, wait, I got a question here. Let's see. All right, Scott, I went ahead and allowed you to unmute yourself. So if you have a question there.
Yeah, it's just a simple one, is it? So you do the routine first and then you check off the fiscal period?
Do the routine first. So you run that year-end close process and then go in and mark the fiscal periods closed. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, so it's first routine and then you check it off?
That's the recommendation there, yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right. All you're doing by doing that, by marking those boxes cleared, or marking those boxes in the fiscal period, you're just saying that I can't post anything else to any of those periods. Now, many companies are marking those boxes off as they move through. So if it's very possible that after you did your month-end process for December, if we're talking about a calendar year end here, after you did that process for December, part of your monthly close process may be to go in and mark that box. That's fine. We're just saying that if you haven't done it already, you may want to go back and do that. It's a completely optional step. We have other clients who never close out any of those periods there.
Okay, so the order isn't super duper important one way or the
No,
other.
it's not. It's not like, oh my God, I closed, I marked that box and now I did this. No, it's it's just more of a suggestion there.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir. All right. Any other questions on the sales side there? All right. Oh, I see another question here. All right. Chen, go ahead.
Well, I'm not familiar with AR, but my understanding is it's when you say all the AR transactions should be posted before close it, does that mean like that includes client billing for as of that year end? Is that correct? I just want to make sure when I get back to my coworkers on who works on AR.
Yeah, anything that has been any transactions for 2020 should
Mm-hmm.
be posted prior to running that year-end close.
Okay. But like if they receive, so all the payment received before year end, as well as any AP process payment posted to that customer as an AR, that should be all done before closing.
Correct, because you're going to want to make sure that all of those transactions hit that year-end that fall into that year-end.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's not the end of the world if you don't, because most of those all those transactions or most of the reports are all transaction date based. But there are a few inquiries and reports that could be a little off if not everything has been posted at prior to the year end.
Gotcha. The one that you said since last closing date reports.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Good questions. Thank you. Lets me know that somebody's still out there listening, which is always good. I like to have a little interaction here. All right, not seeing any other questions, we'll go ahead and move on to our payables area. Now, payables is going to be very, very similar to our receivables. In fact, it's almost identical with the exception of the 1099 processing, which we'll go through in a little bit more detail there as well. All right, so again, payables, just like we had in receivables, there are two year-end closes, if you will, the calendar year and fiscal year. So what the calendar year will move everything from this year to last year. The closing of the fiscal year will transfer all the year-to-date amounts other than the 1099 amount to the last year field on the vendor summary and amount since last close view. Again, it's recommended that you close the calendar year and the fiscal year as close to the last date as you can. This will enable the since last close view to have the correct totals and ensures that all payables reports with year-end totals will be correct. All right. So again, just as an overview there, both year-end close procedures will move the amounts in the year-to-date column to the last year, in the vendor summary window, and in the amounts since last close view. All right, so So again, just like we had in the receivables, there's the calendar year view. If you're looking at the summary view, the amounts since last close, those are the amounts that do not go by the date, but go by the last time the system was, the last time the year-end close was run. All right, so the summary steps here, again, we want to post all of our transactions for the calendar year, make the backup, set the year-end date. We're going to close out the We're going to close out the year using the year-end closing window. Now, step 5, we probably are going to want to go ahead and run that tax year-end closing window. Again, assuming that we had done the receivables close as we did in the last step there. Make a backup, and then step 7 there, it's noted, you're able to print your 1099 statements at any time after all the payables checks with the dates of 2020 have been printed and posted. Okay, so 1099s can be done, that's not reliant on the year-end closing process. So those 1099, those date, the 1099s go by the transaction dates on the checks. So that will be able to pick up those amounts whether or not you had done the year-end close. All right, so let's go through in detail now a little bit of these steps here. So again, we're going to want to make sure that we have all of our transactions posted for the year. Again, it's not, if you don't do that, if you went in ahead and cut some checks for 2021 already, or entered in some invoices for 2021, maybe you have some recurring transactions that you posted, it's not the end of the world. It's just remember that a few of those since last close reports may not agree with the year-to-date reports. All right, it's recommended that you print an age trial balance with options report to show the status of each vendor. And we want to go ahead and keep that off as a part of our permanent record for year-end closing. And there's a couple other reports there that we also recommend: the vendor period analysis report and the vendor year-to-date summary reports. Again, those are going to be transferred to last year's amounts once that year-end closing process is done. So, it's not a bad idea to print those reports off and save them as electronic files there. Step 2, make a backup. Again, very important. We're very big on making backups as you move through this process, just to make sure that any point in time you can go back and if there are any issues. Step 3, once again, we're going to go ahead and set that system date here to 12/31. And then we're going to go ahead and run our year-end closing. So we're going to go ahead under our GP, tools, routines, purchasing this time, and our year-end close. And here's our year-end closing window. Again, we have the ability to do either fiscal or calendar or both. We have that option to print out the report. Again, it's suggested that you print out that report and at least save it off as an electronic document so that you have that information there. So one thing you will note is on the receivables, there was a process button up at the top. For payables, there's a close year button down the bottom here. So again, just note that those are in a little bit different area, but they're the same functions. Okay. Once we go ahead and run that year-end close and get off our report, then the next step here again is we can go ahead and either close out our company periods here, our fiscal periods. And then we can go ahead and close the sales tax periods for the year. So what happens is when we close off the sales tax periods, all it does is it moves that information from the current year to the prior year. So to run that year-end tax close, again, we're going to go under our GP, tools, routines. Again, because it's shared between our purchasing and our sales areas, this is going to actually fall within our company setup, our company routines. So we have our tax year close here. Again, you can run the close, mark the close year, and then print that report. And then go ahead and hit that process there. All right. Now let's talk about the 1099s. So the government this year changed a couple of things. Hopefully everybody's aware that in the past, For non-employee compensation, it was always 1099 miss box 7. There is now a new form called the 1099 NEC form, which is for the non-employee compensation. So it's very important that the 2020 year-end update is uploaded prior to running your statements. Okay, that is if you want to print out your 1099s through GP. If you're just using GP to get that information, and then either doing those manually or have another service that you're providing that information off to, you know, you could probably get away without having to do that, the update. But again, it is highly recommended that you do that year-end update prior to running your 1099s. Now, again, I know 1099s are supposed to be sent out to everyone prior to the end of January. So we've been in constant contact with a lot of our ISV partners. Most of those have said that, you know, by the end of January, by the end of December, they plan on having their 2013 or year-end update compatibility release done. There are a couple that said, you know, it may get pushed off into January. So just please check with us if you do have any ISVs, and you know, if you're on 2018 and you do have any ISVs that you're working with, you know, please check with us before doing that patch, as it will take you up to the latest release of GP. All right. Again, we are able to print 1099 statements at any time after the payables checks with dates in 2020 have been printed and posted. So, you know, if you wanted to, if for some reason you wanted to go ahead and do those 1099s before the end of the year, if you knew you weren't going to cut any more checks, you know, before you ran your year-end close, that's fine. Or, you know, they can be done well after you've done your year-end process. Okay. There's some good information there about the new 1099 NEC form and then 1099 div forms there. Let's talk about the 1099 non-employee compensation. So in the vendor cards, you'll then have the option of selecting. So if I go under vendor cards, options, and I say that is a vendor, there is now a new option there called non-employee compensation. All right. So in the past, we had the div, interest, and miscellaneous. There's now the non-employee compensation. And then we have the ability to say which box we want that information to go in, whether it's non-employee comp, federal tax withheld, state tax, or state income tax there. Okay. There will be a feature that will go through and allow you to review the information there and update the 1099 information from the 1099 miss to the NEC form. All right. So there is also the ability to go through and let's say that you had not marked a vendor as a 1099 individual, but they should have been. There's a utility within the system now that you can go through, and this has been around for a little while, that you can go through and update the 1099 information. So if we go under GP Tools, Utilities, Purchasing, Update 1099 information. In here, we can say whether we want to update the vendor to make them a to change it from a non-1099 to a 1099 vendor. We can update the 1099 transactions, or we can do both the 1099, the vendor, and the 1099. All right. So on this window here, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to say that we want to change what tax type to what box number. So here I could say that I want to change the miscellaneous, or I want to change it from a miscellaneous to a non-employee compensation. Okay. You can indicate whether you have a couple of vendors, or you want to run it for all the vendors, or just one vendor, or anything like that. And then that will go through, it will review, it'll change any of those payments in there that were supposed to be 1099 they're supposed to be for 1099s, where you had not indicated that the vendor should be a 1099 vendor. All right, that's one way you can do it. You can also go through and take a look at the information there. And I apologize if you can hear the dog barking in the background. Sounds like somebody must be walking by, and he's not happy about it. All right. You can also run smart lists to generate views to analyze the 1099 vendors to make sure that the information is correct that you have out there. So again, you can go through and run a smart list and narrow down the search list to all vendors who are 1099 vendors, and then pull out the amounts. All right, and here we can say, this is just an example here where we're saying where the 1099 amount is greater than 0 to get all of that amount there. Right. You can also go in and manually edit 1099 information. So if we go to cards, purchasing, 1099 details. Okay, here we can pull up the 1099 information, and then we can go ahead and put in, the amount that's supposed to be here for that particular vendor. Now, this, by putting in an amount here, does not go back and change any of the transactions that have already been recorded in the system. So, this is not really the fully recommended way. But if you only have a couple of vendors that you want to go through it and make the changes for, you can certainly do that here. And you can do it either for the individual month, or you can just do it for the year in total. Okay, so if you want to go through and record how much should be recorded, should have been 1099-able for each vendor for each month, you can certainly go through and do that. Or you can say, okay, I just want to record at the end of the year, this is the amount that I should have been recording in there, in that field. Okay, again, this is not going to go back and update any of the records. So if you want that good tracking all the way through, you're going to want to go back and run that utility where it's going to move all of those transactions appropriately. Okay. You can also go through, there's a third way of doing it, and that would be to go through the individual transactions and edit the transactions themselves to indicate the 1099 amount there. So I can go through transactions, purchasing, edit 1099 transaction information down at the bottom down here. If I go ahead and pull up a vendor, all right, so this vendor here, here's the amounts that have been recorded. And if for some reason not the whole amount should have been 1099-able, maybe only 1,500 of that should have been, then I can go ahead and make that adjustment there. Again, I'm not going back and changing any of the transaction information in history. So you're not changing any of the agings or the GL information or anything like that. All I'm simply doing is changing the amount of that transaction that should have been recorded for 1099 purposes. Okay. Again, by doing it through there, that again will go back and update the open and history tables appropriately within the system, so that if you go back and review any of those transactions at a later point in time, you'll be able to see the amounts that were corrected there. Okay. So it looks like, did we have? Oh, I thought there was a question out there. Okay. So just a couple of things on the payables year end. Again, GP still does not handle the magnetic media filing of state 1099s. All right. So if you are in a state that does require you to file your state 1099s via mag media, reach out to us, let us know, and we'll put you in touch with Green Shades. Green Shades is a longtime partner of ours, and I'm sure many of you on the call have been using them for, either 1099 purposes or for payroll information as well. So, again, if you do need that mag media information there. Okay, so a couple year-end FAQs. So are inactive vendor records clear during year-end closing process? And if not, how can they be removed? So no, inactive vendor records are not automatically removed. In order to remove those, they can't have any amounts essentially in the system there. So you would end up having to go through and delete out all the history for that vendor and then go ahead and delete that vendor. It's nowadays with the disk space being what it is and cheap and things like that, it's very, very rare that you should need to go through and delete any of those vendors. But, if you do need to, reach out to our support desk and we can certainly walk you through that. All right, let's see what else, if there's anything else in here that I should. Oh yeah, so is there a way to print out the edit list of 1099 vendors before you actually print the 1099 statements? Again, one thing is you can use the smart list to go through and pull up that information, but there is also the ability when you're on the 1099 window there to go ahead and print out that edit list. Okay. All right, let's see. Are there questions here? Yeah, there's a question. Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, Michael. I actually typed it in our conversation group. So I don't know if it's because the version we have. The currently you show in your drop-down box for the vendors in the text type, there's a non-employee compensation is actually included under the text type. But from what I have, it's different. It's still under the miscellaneous and then number 7. What does that mean? Does that mean that my version is not updated, or is it still okay that we use what we have?
Correct. So that would mean that you had not that you're not updated to the latest release, or not the year-end patch has not been updated or run yet. So again, you won't see that in that box until one of those two things have been done. So that's where we're saying that there's once you run that patch, there's also a procedure within there that will take that information and move it automatically from box 7 over to box 1 on the NEC form.
Okay, so we need to do that before we do the year-end closing.
Again, not before you do the year-end close, but before the 1099s have been done. Yes.
Okay, so we should reach out to our contact at Paradigm to take care of that.
Correct. Yeah. If that's something your internal IT department doesn't handle, then yes, certainly reach out to us and we can work with you on getting that updated.
So it's patch update, right? Okay.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Other questions in payables? All right. Again, not seeing any. We'll go ahead and continue on here. So within the manual, the next thing that we kind of go through there is the payroll. But I know that we have a good number of payroll users. I don't know how many payroll users there are on this call. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push that off till the end, till after we do the GL. That way, if you do not have payroll, you don't have to sit there and listen to me talk about payroll. So payroll is a little bit longer, and there's some more things we need to talk about. So we'll just go ahead and push that one off. And we'll go ahead and jump into fixed assets. Now, again, fixed assets may or may not be something that you guys are using on the call here, but it's a relatively quick one, basically the same as the inventory, if you will. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we do the fixed assets close prior to doing anything for 2021 with fixed assets. So again, just like we talked about with inventory, when we want to make sure that we're doing all those the close prior to doing any transaction. So it's again a little bit different than the receivables and payables. So what are the steps here? We're going to enter all the activity for the current year, any additions, changes, transfers, retirements. We're going to want to go ahead and run the depreciation for the final period. So we're going to run that depreciation through the last day of the fiscal year. We're then going to go ahead and post that transaction to the general ledger. So once we run our depreciation, it's going to go ahead and create that journal entry for us. We're going to go ahead and post that transaction, post the batch in the GL. We're going to print out any of our fixed assets reports that we want, such as our year-to-date depreciation and our activity reports. We're going to go ahead and make a backup, set our date, and then we're going to go ahead and close our books. Now, with closing of the books, again, you can have multiple books set up within GP, so you can go ahead and close books at different times if you want. It's suggested that you do close all of the books at the same time. All right. When we run that year-end close, it will then take and increase the fiscal year by 1 for each of those books, and it will change the year-to-date depreciation amount and the year-to-date depreciation amounts to 0. And then a number of other fields are copied such as the cost basis then goes to the beginning cost. The life depreciation is also copied then into the beginning reserve. The quantity is to the beginning quantity, and then the salvage cost is into the beginning salvage there. Step 9 is an optional report to summarize financial data. Again, this is not a required, and it's not even really a recommended thing. But for those of you who have very, very large fixed assets within your system, you can go ahead and summarize that financial data just for the fixed assets. Remember though, once you summarized it, you lose all that detail. There's no way to get that detail back other than going to a backup. So again, make sure that if you are going to summarize that's really what you want to do. Step 10, again, is another optional there where we can delete any inactive asset information. Again, not a required thing and not really a recommended thing, again, unless you're running into space issues. So let's go back and take a look at those steps there. So we again are going to run our depreciation process for the last day, through the last day of the year. We're going to go ahead and post those transactions over to the general ledger and post that GL batch. We're going to go ahead and print out our reports that we want to print out. Then we'll go ahead and close the year. So we're going to go under Tools, Routines, Fixed Assets, Year End. And here's where we were talking about having the ability to choose individual books or just say that you want to close all of the books. Okay, so here you'll see that it says fiscal 2027. If I was to hit continue and it went through and did that, then it would automatically be updated to fiscal 2028 for each of my books there. And then it would again zero out our year-to-date depreciations, move that information into our prior year and life-to-date information as well. All right. Questions on fixed assets. Again, I kind of ran through that kind of quick, but just because I know there's not everybody uses the fixed assets, but we want to make sure we cover that for those who are doing that. All right, not seeing any questions. We're going to go ahead and continue on then. So the one that everybody's been waiting for, the GL year-end close. So let's talk about the year-end close in terms of summary. So we're going to want to go ahead and make sure that we have closed all of our other modules first. All right, so GL should be the last one that we are closing. We're going to want to print any of our final adjusting journal entries in the general ledger. We're going to go ahead and print out an account list to verify the posting type, and we're going to talk about why that's important in a moment there. We'll go ahead and close that last period of the fiscal year if you want to within the financial series setup. We'll go ahead and perform a file maintenance on all of the files in the financial series. So just going through and doing a checklist on those. We're going to make sure that our general ledger settings are correct. We'll make a backup. We'll print a final detailed trial balance, print out all of our financial statements, make sure our next year is set up in the fiscal periods. Then we'll set our fiscal year date to the end of the year. We'll close out that fiscal year and then close all the fiscal periods if we need to do that. And then once that is done, then we can adjust the budget figures for the next year and print out our financial statements for the new year. So let's talk about that, those steps in a little bit more detail there. So again, step one, we want to make sure that we've closed out all of the modules as appropriate. If we're using any other modules, we want to make sure that all those are closed out. The one exception to that is the payroll year-end procedures are independent and are always performed at the calendar year end. So if you're doing a fiscal year, if you're on a fiscal year end, then there's really no payroll year-end procedures to be done. If you're on a calendar year end, then yes, you can do those prior to doing your general ledger processes. We're going to want to make our final adjusting journal entries. Now, when we say our final journal entries, quite often you won't have your final journal entries until, you know, a month or a couple months down the road. If you're using an accounting firm to review and you know, they give you adjusting entries later on in the year, that's fine. We can always go back and post transactions to a prior year, assuming we have that set up to, we have the system set up to do that. So you know, a lot of people say, oh, I don't want to close my my GL until I get those adjustments from our accounting team. Recommendation is do not wait for that. Okay. One of the biggest reasons is if you do not go through and run the year-end close for general ledger, your financial statements will not appear correct for the new year. Okay, so you will not have those beginning balances. So let me back up here. When you run the year-end close, okay, again, it takes anything that's set up as a balance sheet and rolls those over as beginning balances for the new year. Anything that you have set up as an income statement account, we'll close those out and post those off into the retained earnings account. So if we were to run a financial statement in January of 2021 without doing the year-end close, we're not going to have those beginning balances to report off of for our balance sheet. So, you know, our income statement might still be okay because it's pulling in the date transactions based upon, you know, January of 21. But our balance sheet is not going to have those beginning balances reflected in there. So it's not going to appear correct. So we want to make sure we run that year-end close as close to the year-end close as possible. There's no need to wait for additional adjustments. All right, so as I mentioned, the posting accounts are a very important thing. What we want to do is we will want to run at least a smart list. You can run the account list from your financial series and take a look at every single account in there, but you're going to want to at least run a smart list that will show you how those accounts are set up. So for example here, if I go into smart list and I go under my financial series here and I go into my accounts. Okay, so here are all of my accounts. Right here are the posting types. So I want to make sure that all of these accounts are set up with the proper posting account. All of my balance sheet accounts are set up as balance sheet accounts, and all of my income and expense accounts are set up as profit and loss accounts. And in fact, down here, I can see that there's one account down here called project losses that is set up as a balance sheet account when it should be a profit and loss. So if I do not correct, what will end up happening is, even though it's within this numerical sequence here, This account, project losses here, it's 6,900 account, that balance would just be rolled over into the beginning balance for the next year for that account. It would not be closed out into my retained earnings. That's not what I want to have happen. I want to make sure that all of my profit and loss accounts are rolled into my retained earnings account. So again, you can kind of scroll through this and eyeball this, or what you could also do is, in fact, in the book, we have the example of this. So what I could do here is I could go into my search and say where my posting type, where my column posting type is equal to profit and loss, and where my main account segment, okay, so if you're not seeing that in here, you can again do a drop down here and say main. So I want my main account segment is less than, in my case, I know that all of my profit and loss accounts start at 4,000. So I'm going to say is less than 4,000. So in here, I'm looking and I see, okay, well, it looks like all of my P&L accounts are set up correctly. So let's go through and take a look and see if all of my balance sheet accounts are set up correctly as well. So I'm going to go back in here to search, and I'm going to say where my posting type is now equal to balance sheet. And I'm going to say where my main account segment is now greater than 4,000. And I hit OK. And now I can see I have a number of accounts here that are set up as balance sheet accounts that fall within my profit and loss area. Now these down here, some of these down here are unit accounts, so I'm not as worried about those. Those can be either ones. Unit accounts are handled separately from the standard GL accounts, but it's these up here that I'm concerned about. So what I would want to do is go through and maybe double click on those, come in here and make sure that I set those up as the proper posting types. Okay, and then I can go ahead and refresh that, and again go through and do that for all of those accounts prior to closing out my year. Now, it's not the end of the world if you don't do that prior to it. There are some scripts that can be run, and you can go back and reverse a year and things like that. So if you don't do that, it's not like your system's going to blow up or anything like that. It's just highly suggested that you take those extra steps, review those accounts, set them up properly, make sure they're set up properly prior to doing your end close. All right. Once we have all of our accounts set up properly, we're going to go ahead and run check links on our financial system. So we're going to go under our tools, maintenance, check links, and then we're going to choose all of our financial series here. Okay, and I'm not going to run that. That may take a few moments there to run it, so I'm not going to go ahead and do that. But what that will do is that will go through and it'll match up the detail records that you have in there with your historical records and make sure that all of the transaction amounts are correct for all of your accounts. That may be a normal step that most of you are doing as part of your month-end process anyway. So, all right. Once we run our check links, the next thing is we want to check our general ledger settings. We want to make sure that we are keeping our historical information there. So we're going to go under our GP tools setup, financial, general ledger. And there's a couple of things that we want to check in here. One is we want to maintain our history for our accounts and our transactions. And if you're doing budget transactions, you can also maintain the history for that. If these buttons here are not marked when you go through and do a year-end close, you will not be able to go back and run any historical GL reports. Okay, so again, it's very, very important that we want to make sure that these buttons here are marked, that we're maintaining our history. For those of you who have done it in the past, hopefully nobody has come in here and changed any of those. So it's just a matter of making sure that they're still marked there. Okay. Once we've confirmed that we're going to be maintaining our history, then we'll make another backup of the system. And now we're ready to go ahead and run a detailed trial balance. When we run that detailed trial balance, it's quite often, our suggestion is do not run that to paper, run that to a file so that you have all that information handy, but you're not going through and using up 5 boxes of paper because your trial balance reports are thousands and thousands of pages long for a detailed trial balance. So again, highly recommended that you run that detailed trial balance and save it off to a file rather than printing that out to paper. Go ahead and print out all of your final financial statements. Make sure your balance sheet and your income statements look good. Then confirm that our next year is set up. All right. As part of that year-end closing process, again, our amounts are going to be rolled over to that new year. So we want to make sure that we have that new year set up prior to running the actual close. So again, we're going to go under Tools, Setup, Fiscal Periods, and then we're going to want to make sure that that 2021 year has been set up. If you need assistance with setting that up, certainly let us know. But again, most of you have probably done that over the years and aren't going to need our assistance with that. Once we make sure that our new year is set up, we'll go ahead and change our system date again to 12/31/2020 if we need to. And now we're actually ready to go ahead and do that year-end close process. So we're going to go under our GP Tools, Routines, Financial, year-end closing here. And here's our year-end closing window. So we want to confirm our year-end, our retained earnings account. Again, this is the account that all of our profit and loss type accounts are going to be rolled into. So we want to make sure that this is the proper account. The next here is starting journal entry. Now, my personal recommendation is just leave this alone and let this go and just continue on setting up the new journal entry. I know there are some people who like to change that journal entry number, start it off with the year and then an 0001 so that, it starts over every year. That's, I guess a personal preference there. My preference is just let that go and just let the system do its thing and automatically use the next journal entry number in that sequence there. We also have 2 options here. One is remove unused segment numbers and maintain inactive accounts. So what do those mean there? So the first thing there is remove unused segment numbers. So again, these are optional. You don't have to mark these, but what that will do is if you've used the mass update for your GL account numbers, quite often there might be some segments that get created because of the range of numbers that you used or something like that. And some of those segments may have never been used during the year. By marking this button here, it will then go through and remove any of those unused segment numbers. All right. If you don't want those unused segment numbers removed, if you want to retain those, maybe you're going to end up using those segment numbers in the next year or something like that, then don't mark those and they'll just be there for you. Okay. The next one here is maintain inactive accounts. Again, that's an optional there. For those accounts that are marked as inactive, if you if the box is not marked, all inactive accounts with zero balances will be deleted. Again, not just zero balances, but no transactions in there, no nothing like that. And then you have the ability to, even if they're zero balances but have budget amounts, you can go ahead and mark that and say, okay, I want to maintain the inactive accounts with budget amounts, or I just want to maintain all of my inactive accounts. All right. Once we have those options there done, we'll go ahead and hit close year. That will run through that year-end closing process. Again, updating all of our balance sheet accounts to for the beginning balances of the next year, closing out all of our profit and loss accounts into our year-end close, into our retained earnings account, sorry. And it will then go ahead and print out a report at the end. So you will get a report that shows all the accounts that have been rolled up into the retained earnings account. Okay. In addition to transferring the current year amounts, it will reconcile and summarize the GL balances that have accumulated through the year. It'll transfer current year profit and loss amounts to retained earnings accounts, zero out all profit and loss account balances after they've been closed. It'll summarize the balance sheet accounts, bringing the balances forward as the accounts beginning balances for the new year. Remove accounts that are inactive in status. Again, unless we've marked that box there, we'll remove unused segment numbers if that box is marked there. And it will print out the year-end closing report. Now, it's important to note that the year-end closing report, that particular report cannot be reprinted. So it's always a good idea when that report comes up to make sure you print it and probably save it off as an electronic file as well. All right. Once we've gone ahead and run our year-end close, we can then go back into our system, into our company, into our fiscal periods here, and just go ahead and close off all of our boxes if we want. Okay. The next step here would be to go ahead and adjust any of our budget figures and print out our financial statements for the new year. So we're going to want to go ahead and print out our balance sheet and income statements for the new year. Our income statement, again, should be zero because unless you've already continued to post information in for 2021. But we want to make sure that our balance sheet report prints out properly with the beginning balances, and that our retained earnings account has been updated for the profit or loss from the prior year. All right. Once we confirm that the year end has been completed, our financial statements are good. You could print out a trial balance if you wanted to as well, in addition to the standard financial statements. Once we're make sure all that is good. Do another backup, make sure that we have a good backup after our year-end close, just in case. All right, so that is really the steps for GL. There's one other thing that we want to talk about, and that is the ability to go back and reverse a historical year. So if for some reason you do need to go back and reverse a historical year, this option has been available within the last couple of releases. It wasn't always available. So if I go ahead and go back into my year-end closing, you'll note here that there's a reverse historical year. When you click on this button here, it will reverse the most current year that has been closed. So in this case here, I'm in 2024. So if I was to reverse a historical year, that would reverse out 2023. I could then, after doing that, I could then click on reverse historical year again and reverse out 2022. We haven't seen many problems with people doing that, but there should be a very, very good and compelling reason to have to go through and do that. Typically, there are other ways of fixing things without having to go back and reversing that year. I just, as a personal opinion there, anytime you're going back and undoing things that that there was a process for, it's always open to having something else happen. Again, we haven't seen many issues with that, but again, I just don't like opening yourself up for those types of a problem to come into, especially in 2020. Who knows what would happen if you tried to do that in 2020. But anyway, if you are going to do that, please, please, please make sure you do a good backup prior to running that reverse close. Okay, just in case something does go wonky, you'll have that good backup there. All right. So within our manual, there are steps to go through and correct things if if an account was supposed to be set up as a P&L account and it was set up as a balance sheet account. There's the steps to go through and do that. Also, there's the same steps to go through if it's the opposite way, if a balance sheet was set up as a P&L account. So again, we do have those processes in there. If you do want help with that, please reach out to our support desk and they can certainly go through and help you do that. Again, save yourself that problem. Run the smart list, make sure that your accounts are set up properly before going and doing the year-end close. Okay. Now, let's talk about what will happen a couple of months down the road. You now get your year-end adjustments from your auditors, and you need to go back and make those adjustments. So what we're going to want to make sure is in our general ledger. So I'm going to go under Tools, Setup, Financial General Ledger. There is an option right in here, Allow Posting to History. Okay, because we have done our year-end process, that year is now considered a historical year. So most times people will have this button unmarked here to make sure that employees don't inadvertently post to a year that they're not supposed to be posting to. So when you do get those adjustments from your accounting firm and you do need to post those into a historical year, you would just come in here, mark that box, go in, make your journal entries, post them with a 12/31/2020 date. When you post those with a prior year date, the system will automatically run that year-end quasi year-end process again, and it will update the beginning balances for 2021, and it will, if any of those accounts are P&L accounts, it'll roll those up into the retained earnings automatically for you as well. So there's no extra process. You don't have to run a year-end close again or anything like that. You just go back, make sure this button here is marked, post it to a historical year. You should get a message saying, hey, you sure you want to do this? Yes, I want to do that. Go ahead and post it. It'll roll forward the beginning balances properly for you. Once you have done that transaction, come back in here, unmark that allow posting again to make sure that no one else inadvertently posts to a historical year. And you are good to go. So let's see if there are any other questions then in the GL. All right, I see another question over here. All right, go ahead.
All right, sorry, I have tons of questions. More of confirmation because last year was my first year doing it. So I work with my reps to do it, and it seems that when I was trying to do the year-end closing, there's two things that. One is everybody needs to be out of the system, otherwise it cannot run, right? Except the person who's closing it.
Correct. It's it's really highly suggested that nobody else is in there because it's a system process. You don't want anybody trying to post or anything like that. So yes, everybody should be out of the system when you go through and run that year-end close.
Yeah. The second thing is like I have to change the date on the lower left-hand corner bottom to the year end of December 31st for this year will be 2020 before I do the closing. Is that right?
Correct. That way, when your when that transaction happens, it has that year-end date. So the system will automatically create that. Essentially, it'll create a journal entry for you, zeroing out all the balance, all the profit and loss accounts into retained earnings. So you want to make sure that you're using that proper year-end date there.
Okay. All right. Yeah, because last year I was trying to find it in the pop-up window as of what year to close, but it was very confusing. So at least that's helpful for me as a first year.
Very good.
All right.
Okay, looks like John has a question. John, go ahead and unmute yourself there. John, you have to unmute yourself if you have a question. Okay, maybe he just inadvertently hit the inadvertently raised his hand just to let me know he's still there. That's nice. All right, any other questions on the GL side? Again, it's not a hard process. None of these year-end closing processes are very difficult. You know, just a couple things you want to make sure that you are doing along the way. Probably, again, the most important thing in all of these is to make sure you have your GL account set up as the proper account types. You know, that's really the biggest thing there. Oh, let's try this again. John, go ahead and unmute yourself. I can't unmute you, John. You have to unmute yourself. So. If you're unable to do that, if you want to go ahead and put that in the question there. Okay, let's see. I'm sorry. What happened to historical data if the inactive accounts were removed? So if you're going to be doing if you're going to be removing inactive accounts, again, you can't delete any accounts that have any historical transactions in them or anything like that. Um, so you know, you would have to go through and remove the history for those accounts prior to actually being able to delete any accounts. Okay, so I guess the answer is, nothing would happen to the historical accounts because to the historical amounts because you couldn't, if there were historical amounts, you couldn't delete those accounts. The removing of those accounts would only be if they're inactive and they have no transactions in there. Hopefully that answered your question. Great. Any other questions on the GL side? All right. Well, seeing no questions, I'm going to go ahead and continue on with payroll. So those of you who are not interested in learning about the payroll year-end process and want to go ahead and drop off, I thank you for your time today. If you have any questions, please let us know. For those of you continuing, who are interested in the year-end payroll process, hold on and we will get there in a moment. What I think I want to do, we've been going here for about 2 hours or so. So before we jump into payroll, why don't we go ahead and take a quick 5-minute bio break, and then we'll come back and we'll jump into payroll. Again, any of you dropping off at this point, thank you very much for attending, and let us know if there's anything else we can assist with. We'll be right back and get started in payroll in about 5 minutes. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so it looks like we still have some hardy folks here hanging on that want to go through the payroll year-end process. So thank you for hanging with us. All right, so within payroll, there are actually two checklists that we need to talk about. One is processing our 2021 pay runs before printing our year-end statements, and then the actual payroll year-end closing. So in our manual, there are a couple of important notes about the 2020 year-end patch. So once the 2020 year-end update has been, the patch has been loaded up, there will now be labels for box 14 on all pay code types where you can report the COVID Families First Coronavirus Response Act, or the FFCRA pay. Prior to loading up that year-end update, the business expense pay code and pay type was allowed you to key in a W-2 label. Employers are expected to separately report qualified sick leave wages and qualified family leave wages paid under that act on Form W-2 box 14 or on a separate statement. So once you install the update, go to the setup of the COVID pay codes and properly put the box 14 label on each code. And then when prompted, roll down that to all the employees. All right, so again, as part of that year-end process, there will be additional labels for all the pay codes that you will want to roll down to all of the employees. Now, let's talk about processing 2020 pay runs prior to printing out our year-end statements. So it's important that you follow these instructions here because it's a little bit different process than any of the other modules. So step one, we want to verify the version. We want to complete all of our 2020 pay runs. We want to complete all the payroll month end, period end, and quarter end procedures. We want to then make a backup entitled pre-2020 year-end wage file backup or something along those lines, but that backup is going to be very important. We're then going to install the 2020 year-end update. Okay, and again, just a note there, make sure that you're running that update or that you don't log in to the application until it has been installed on the server and all workstations. Okay, so again, you're going to want to do that update and make sure that it has been done and run on all workstations prior to letting anyone else go back in and utilizing GP. So step 6 will be to create the year-end wage file. And then again, making a backup of that called a post 2020 year-end wage file. After you create that wage file, then you're able to go ahead and install the 2021 tax table update. Okay, so there are two updates that we need to talk about. One is the 2020 year-end updates, and then there's the 2021 tax table updates. Okay, we're not going to want to run or install that tax table update until after we have created that year-end file. All right. Once we've got that done, then we can go ahead and archive any inactive employees. We can set up the fiscal period for 2021. We can delete any inactive information there if we want. We can close out the fiscal period series for 2020, and then we can install the 2021 payroll tax update. Again, just another note there, do not install the 2021 tax update tables until you've created that year-end wage file. Once you've installed that 2021 tax table update, you can then go ahead and process the 2021 pay runs. Okay. After you've done that, you can go ahead and process any of those pay runs, enter in that information, run those checks. Then we can go ahead and print out the W-2 validation report, the W-2 forms, and the W-3 transmittal forms, the 1099-Rs, and then create the mag media if necessary. All right, so again, just kind of going through that in a little more detail then. So we're going to want to make sure that, I'm sorry, in there it talks about being able to go out to customer source and getting that download. You should also, if you have your Connect turned on your home page, you should also there be able to see the download for the tax updates, or you can go right into the system and do the download there through the system as well. So again, walking it through in detail here, we're going to want to complete all of our 2020 pay runs, complete our payroll month, period, and quarter end procedures, make that backup, install the 2020 year-end update, create the year-end wage file. Okay, again, to create that year-end wage file, we're going to go under GP, Tools, Routines, Payroll, Year-end Wage Report. I'm sorry. Payroll, year-end closing, and then create the year-end wage file for the year. So again, this would be 2020 in here. Then we'll go ahead and make a backup of the entire system. Verify our W-2 information. And then go ahead and run those 2021 tax updates. And at that point, then we can go ahead and run our 2021 payroll. Okay, so again, just the important steps there to remember that we don't want to have our tax table, our 2021 tax tables in there prior to running that wage report, because that will affect the federal, the maximum amounts for Social Security withholdings, FICA, FUTA, those types of things. So we want to make sure that we run our year-end wage report prior to loading up those 2021 tax updates. All right. If for some reason you need to go back and make an adjustment to 2020, you'll need to go back to your backup that you have prior to updating the 2021 tax update, the tax tables, and essentially rerun that process, because if you try and run it with those new tables, the system is not date sensitive in there, and then it will use whatever the tax table updates that you have in there. All right. So again, under tools, routines, payroll, we have our year-end closing. We have our year-end wage report. All right, which will allow us to go through. I don't have anything closed out, so I can't run that there. But we would be able to run that year-end wage report, and then go ahead and edit our W-2s, print our W-2s, edit our 1099-Rs, print our 1099-Rs, and do our W-2 electronic filing there. All right. So questions on the payroll side of things? Again, if you have any questions about your end payroll process or anything like that, you can certainly reach out to us. And I know some of you on the phone have us help you with that year-end process for payroll, but certainly let us know if you do have any questions. So, any questions from anyone here still in the meeting? I'm not seeing any questions. All right. Well, if we don't have any questions, then I will again thank you for your time today. Thank you for sitting through this and walking through the year-end processes with me. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or reach out to our support desk, and we will be more than happy to walk you through any of these processes. So with that, I will go ahead and stop the recording.